What happens when you finally wake up, and that fire that used to burn you from the inside out suddenly doesn't ignite anything at all? They promised you that spiritual awakening would feel like an explosion of light, like clarity, purpose, inner power. But instead, you found something else, something colder, something emptier, something real. You, the sensitive one, the seeker, the soul that never settled for what the world offered. You started seeing beyond the masks. You began to understand the game. You noticed how life plays on autopilot, like a soulless dance, choreographed by habit, fear, and routine. And when your eyes opened, it wasn't the light that blinded you. It was the silence. A silence so thick, so sacred, yet so uncomfortable, as if something inside you had stopped working. You no longer wanted to chase anything. You didn't feel the urge to impress, to compete, or even to arrive anywhere. The desire to prove yourself simply dissolved. And in its place, an eerie calm took over, a kind of hollow peace. Does that sound familiar? That sensation that the soul turned off the lights, but forgot to switch on new ones. Your body's still alive, but the fire isn't. Your mind recognizes that something has shifted, but it can't quite decode what your heart already knows, that the old motivation is gone. You're not alone. This happens to those who truly awaken, not the ones who just read about spirituality or talk about it to sound wise, but the ones who actually live it, the ones who dare to die before they die, the ones who are no longer satisfied with noise, applause, or costume roles. But no one talks about this part, right? No one warns you that the hidden cost of awakening is losing everything you thought you were. And without ego, without script, without stage, how do you move? Where do you act from? This isn't a motivational speech meant to get you back on your feet. This is an invitation to look at that void without fear, to understand why you feel the way you feel, to discover that in that stillness, in that hole, in that apparent nothingness, there is a seed you don't know how to name yet, but one that has already started to germinate within you. They told you that awakening meant finding your purpose, your fire, your center. They sold you enlightenment like it was a shortcut to fulfillment, as if simply seeing the truth would make you feel alive again. But no one told you that sometimes seeing the truth turns you off, because the drive you used to have wasn't really yours. It came from the ego. It was a force born out of fear, fear of not being enough, fear of not belonging, fear of not being seen. And when you awaken, fear melts away, but with it, so does the fuel that made you run. You stop, not out of laziness, not because you've lost interest, but because something within you simply cannot keep moving the way it used to. What once inspired you now feels ridiculous. The goals that once excited you now seem fake, and it's right there, in that strange stillness, that the fall begins. But the fall is not downward, it is inward. It's a silent unlearning, like your soul is slowly erasing, one by one, all the instructions you were given since childhood. Be someone, do more, prove your worth. But what if there's nothing left to prove? What if worth isn't earned, but remembered? That's where the limbo begins. The ego falls. But the true self hasn't taken form yet. The motivation that used to drive you dies, but the new one hasn't found its voice. And there you are, suspended, confused, silent. This is the hidden cost of awakening. It's not instant peace. It's total dismantling. It's like tearing down a house before knowing what the next one will look like. And in the meantime, there's only rubble. And without a home, without a script, without urgency. You feel strange. You look in the mirror and don't recognize your reflection. You wonder why nothing excites you anymore. What once felt like life now seems like a badly lit stage. No applause, no meaning, no direction. But listen to this carefully. That is not failure. It's transition. It is the exact process that begins when the soul starts to take control of the body again. Because the ego always screamed, but the soul whispers. And in the middle of that muffled noise, you begin to hear the first murmur. It's not a command. It's not a duty. It's not an obligation. It's more like a breeze, a subtle shift, a barely perceptible movement. Yet, it's real. And suddenly, you understand. You didn't lose motivation. You lost the mask. What comes next bears no resemblance to anything you've ever experienced. Because what follows now will no longer be driven by fear. It will come from truth. It all starts quietly. One morning, you wake up without the usual urgency, without the old sense of direction. One night, you find yourself staring at the ceiling, not thinking about anything in particular, just floating. You hear your friends talk about goals, travels, dreams achieved, and you listen silently as if you've already lived it all in another life. There's a weight in your chest that you can't name. It's not sadness, it's not laziness, it's something else, something heavier, quieter. And so you begin to ask yourself, what's happening to me? Why don't I want anything? Why doesn't anything excite me anymore? Did I break inside? Did something disconnect and never come back? But no, you're not broken. You're just without reference points, because the old ones no longer work. They no longer resonate. They were answers that belong to a version of you that no longer exists. What no one tells you about awakening is that it's not a destination. It's a demolition. It's not a constant state of illumination. It's temporary blindness, like when a bright light hits your eyes and blinds you first, before you learn to see again, with different eyes. And in that strange in-between, you become blind at the level of the soul. You don't know what you want. You don't know what your purpose is anymore. And the uncertainty becomes total. Outside, the world keeps spinning with its slogans. Follow your dreams. Never stop. Make it count. But you hear all that as noise. Those phrases feel like they're meant for someone else. Someone who still operates from the ego, who still needs to be someone instead of just being. And there it is, the real conflict. No one prepared you for the silence that follows awakening. Because this silence isn't emptiness, it's a crater, a sacred echo that keeps repeating one truth. I am no longer what I was, but I don't yet know what I am. Can you live in that space? Can you stay in that strange place with no identity, no plan, no direction? Most people can't. Most people run. They numb themselves. They put the costume back on. They return to the race, even if deep down they no longer believe in it. They convince themselves it was just a phase, that going back is easier than living at the threshold. But you don't fit anymore, and you know it, because trying to fit in again only makes you feel emptier. It's as if your soul is whispering, "Don't push me back into what no longer vibrates." That's why you're tired. Not tired of the world. Tired of pretending you still believe in it. Not tired of life. Tired of performing. Not tired of doing. Tired of forcing yourself to do from a self that quietly died. This is where the old fire burns out, and the new spark hasn't ignited yet. You're in between fires, between identities, between systems of meaning. You're a chrysalis, not a caterpillar, not yet a butterfly, just a shapeless, unproductive thing that serves no immediate function. But inside that shapelessness, everything is there, everything new, everything real. And yes, it hurts, because no one applauds you for pausing. No one celebrates your emptiness. Society doesn't know what to do with someone who isn't running, who isn't chasing, who doesn't have answers. So you start judging yourself. You call yourself lazy, lost, useless, but you're not. You're being rewired from the inside. Carl Jung knew this. That's why he spoke of the nigredo, the dark night of the soul, the stage where the ego dissolves and the self begins to take form. But that process is silent, it's blind, it's slow, and you have only one option: stay. Hold yourself through the not knowing. Trust through the not feeling. Because if you run now, if you force yourself to produce, to perform, to go back to the familiar, you will betray yourself. And the soul doesn't forget betrayal. It will wait. Always. It will wait in silence until one day you stop running long enough to finally hear it. Carl Jung never romanticized awakening. He didn't dress it up in pastel colors or wrap it in sweet, comforting words. For him, true transformation didn't begin with a divine revelation. It began with a brutal unraveling. The fall of the ego wasn't the end. It was the threshold, the entry point to the journey toward the self, that deeper identity that needs no mask, no external validation to exist. Jung called it individuation, a process of integration, of becoming whole. Not better, not more positive, not more successful, just more real. And to become real, he said, we must go through the shadow, through everything we deny, repress, and hide. It's not about flying toward the light, it's about descending into the basement and lighting a single candle. This is why Jung spoke of the nigredo, the dark stage of internal alchemy. That phase where everything old decays, where the superficial self crumbles and you're left suspended in a fertile emptiness. There's no shape, no certainty, only a silence that hurts but purifies, a silence that burns yet prepares. In that silence, what once seemed like motivation reveals itself as performance, and what once felt like depression becomes the soul's rest. Because you're not unmotivated, you're simply done with lying. You can no longer force yourself to do what you don't feel. You can no longer sell your energy to a system that doesn't recognize your truth. Jung also spoke of enantiodromia, that moment when something, pushed to its extreme, flips into its opposite. The ego that runs endlessly collapses. The drive to achieve, conquer, impress, transforms into a deep longing to disappear. Not as an escape, but as a necessity, to begin again, from another route. And here enters the archetype of the hermit. Not the escapist recluse, but the wise one who retreats in order to listen, to reorder the inner chaos, to prepare for a return, not driven by performance, but by authenticity. Sometimes disappearing isn't giving up, it's protecting the seed of something new. But the world hates that stage. It mistakes it for failure. It pathologizes it, tries to medicate it, speed it up, correct it, because the modern world idolizes productivity and despises mystery. But the soul is not in a rush. The self is not born under pressure. It only emerges when the ego yields, when the persona goes quiet. That's why Jung said that enlightenment doesn't consist in imagining figures of light. It means making the darkness conscious. And that is exactly what you're doing, even if it doesn't look like it, even if no one sees it, even if you doubt it. You are illuminating a part of yourself that has been dormant for years, maybe even lifetimes. The self that used to perform is dead. The script that held you up has burned away. And now you're here, waiting, listening, rebuilding. You don't know how, and you have nothing to show for it. But this is sacred. This is spiritual bravery. Because remaining in the void takes more courage than chasing 1,000 goals. Individuation is not a destination. It's a constant passage between death and rebirth, between confusion and clarity, between who you were and who you don't yet know you can become. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who you've always been, beneath all the roles, beneath all the masks. And yes, the path is lonely, because no one can walk it for you. You can have guides, books, signs, but the real journey is internal. And sometimes all you can do is stay still, not move, not distract yourself, not betray yourself. Just hold on, even when nothing has form yet. This is what Jung meant by living symbolically. It means listening to the soul, letting dreams speak, sensing where the inner wind is blowing. It means not deciding from the anxious mind, but from resonance, from the body, from that part of you that can't explain, but knows how to recognize. Because the self doesn't push, the self calls. And now you're beginning to hear it. And then, just when you thought everything was lost, something starts to move. It's not fire. It's not an explosion. It's barely a tremor, as if the soul is breathing for the first time after a long sleep. You don't know why, but one day you feel the desire to write, or to walk, or simply to sit in silence and listen to the wind. Not because you have to, but because something inside says yes. It's a new kind of motivation, one that doesn't come from fear or pressure, one that doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't compete. It's a gentle yet firm force, an internal pulse that seeks no applause, no outcome, no heroic goals. It just wants to express the truth, that which can no longer be hidden, that which needs to come out. Here, there is no urgency, no anxiety, no clock ticking, because the soul is not in a hurry. And finally, you realize you don't need to be either. You discover that acting from presence doesn't mean staying still. It means moving at the right time, from the right place, with a heart unburdened by need. You begin to feel something new, a strange peace, a calm that doesn't depend on whether things work out or not, because you no longer act to achieve. You act to honor what you are, what vibrates in you, what the world needs to receive through your authentic existence, not to impress, but to resonate. And the most beautiful thing is that this action, this energy, this creation becomes more powerful than any goal you once had. Because now, you no longer need applause. You're satisfied with feeling that you're not betraying your essence. You're fulfilled by that inner sense of congruence, of coherence, of deep alignment with your soul. You come to a quiet but powerful realization. You can say no without guilt. You can choose silence without feeling like you've failed. You can be present in a conversation without needing to convince anyone of anything. You begin to live from a different center, a quieter place, a more honest space, one that is rooted not in the noise of the world, but in the stillness of your own being. And from that stillness, you discover something unshakable, indestructible, a place inside you that no chaos can touch. You no longer need a map meticulously drawn by someone else's expectations. You no longer crave clear goals written in ink and stone. What you need, you already carry, a living compass. And that compass is no longer external. It's no longer someone else's voice, someone else's rule book, someone else's approval. It lives inside of you now. And every time you align with it, Every time you listen to its subtle pull, the path unfolds. Not because you force it to, not because you push the pieces into place, but because life itself recognizes the truth inside you and responds. This is the paradox. The less you push, the more things begin to move. The less you struggle, the more things begin to flow. The less you wear masks to fit in, the more deeply you connect. Not with everyone, no, but with those who are also awakening. With those who have also dared to sit in the silence, who have heard the same wordless call and stayed long enough to hear what emerges from within it. And from this new center, from this inner alignment, you begin again. You create again. You move again. But not to fill a void, not to prove yourself, not to silence your fears. You move because the emptiness that once felt unbearable has transformed into seed, and you, almost without noticing, have become fertile soil. You've become a bridge, a channel, a vessel between what cannot be seen and what longs to be born. Motivation has not died. It has simply changed shape. It no longer burns with the frantic fire of urgency or the adrenaline of needing results. Instead, it glows with a steady flame, one that does not flicker in the wind. It is no longer about outcomes. It's about devotion. Quiet, unwavering, grounded devotion. A deep and sacred commitment. Not to performance, not to perfection, but to truth. And if you've made it this far, if these words are echoing inside of you, it's not by accident. Something within you chose to stay. In the silence, in the uncertainty, in the space where most people turn away. And that, though few will say it, is a rare kind of courage. It is an act of quiet rebellion, a sacred resistance. Because to sit in the unknown without trying to escape, it is not weakness, it is strength of the highest order. Maybe you've felt strange lately, as if the world continues to spin, and you are just still. Maybe you've been feeling disconnected, unmotivated, as if your inner compass had stopped pointing anywhere at all. Perhaps you've looked around and wondered, what happened to my fire? But you didn't forget your path. You're remembering it, not from your mind, but from your soul, from a place so deep and true that it cannot be rushed or forced. A place that takes time, that honors timing, that knows becoming is not a sprint, it is a metamorphosis. You are not lost. You are just in the chrysalis. And if any part of this message resonated with your experience, if you felt, even for a second, that someone finally put words to the invisible thing you've been carrying, then I invite you to write it down. Not for likes, not for recognition, but for yourself. So your soul can hear your voice speaking its truth out loud. So your inner knowing can be anchored in your own expression. Leave a comment that says, I'm in the chrysalis and I will emerge. That phrase is not just a slogan. It's a promise, a silent agreement between you and your essence. It's a symbol. It's your soul whispering, I didn't give up. I'm just waiting to remember my shape. And maybe, just maybe, someone on the other side of the world will read it. Someone in their own moment of solitude, in their own dark night, in their own quiet transformation. And in reading your words, they will feel less alone. So if this message speaks your language, if this frequency hums in your bones, subscribe, turn on the bell. Not for the noise of more content, but because here, we do not speak from the surface. We don't pretend. We don't perform. We sit with you in the shadows, in the mystery, in the sacred space between what was and what is yet to come. We sit with you in the chrysalis, quietly holding space, until you remember what your wings feel like. Thank you for finding the courage to look within yourself, Thank you for choosing not to run away when things felt overwhelming. Thank you for staying with yourself, even when the pain was loud and the answers were silent. That, right there, is the essence of true awakening. Not in grand revelations or external miracles, but in those quiet moments where you chose to face your truth rather than escape it. It takes incredible strength to remain still when your mind urges you to flee, when everything inside you feels like it's breaking apart. And yet, you stayed. You stayed through the confusion, through the shadows, through the doubt. That act alone, the decision to not abandon yourself, is the beginning of everything. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be. Growth rarely feels like a warm embrace. It often feels like falling apart. But even in that disintegration, something sacred is unfolding. You don't have to rush. This isn't a race. There is no destination you must reach in a certain time. No level of spiritual achievement you have to unlock. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, even if your mind tells you otherwise. Stop measuring your progress by how much you know or how quickly you heal. That's not what this is about. This is about trust. Deep, quiet, unwavering trust. Not in the world, not in others, but in yourself. In the process that is uniquely yours. And that trust doesn't require understanding. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to figure everything out right now. In fact, some of the most beautiful transformations happen in the dark, in the confusion, in the stillness. All you really need is to trust that there is meaning in the mess, that something greater is moving through your life, even if you can't see it yet. Even if you feel lost, you're still on the path. Even if it feels like nothing is happening, everything is shifting. And when the moment comes, when the timing is right, when the pieces begin to align, you won't feel the need to escape anymore. You won't feel the weight of fear holding you back. You won't run. You'll rise. You'll fly. Because by then, you'll know who you are. Not because someone told you, not because you read it in a book or heard it in a video, but because you discovered it in the hardest, most honest place there is, within yourself. So thank you, again, for staying, for breathing through the storms, for listening to your soul when the world told you to be quiet. That is the revolution. That is the transformation. That is the awakening.